This is a Clark University podcast.
When I think about what's insufficient about Juneteenth, I mean that it's a starting point, not an ending point, right? So getting federal and state recognition is a great starting point, but the more difficult work is ahead and can be done if people are committed to doing something. If you're really going to have something more than, just adding another holiday, you really need people who take it on themselves and say, look, we recognize this and we want to make this a part of our local consciousness and begin to reconcile.
That's Ousmane Power-Greene, a history professor and the program director of Africana Studies at Clark University. Days away from Juneteenth, the federal holiday commemorating emancipation of enslaved Black Americans, Power-Greene took a moment to reflect.
Without an understanding of slavery, there really is no jubilee over being emancipated. You see very concerted efforts to make a town or community think critically about enslavement, which of course is tantamount when we think about broader questions of emancipation. Once you have an understanding of what enslavement was like, you can imagine, what Black people who, upon emancipation, begin to reconstruct family units, find husbands and wives and children sold off, to begin to really imagine a life that would be different, where perhaps they could own property, perhaps their labor could go to their community and their family. When you understand all that, then you get the holiday.
Juneteenth recognizes a monumental moment in U.S. history, but it also presents an opportunity to chart the path for continued education and equality. I'm Melissa Hansen, a producer in Clark's communications office, and this is Challenge Change.
When you think about what exactly, we're celebrating, we celebrate Juneteenth. I mean, we're celebrating emancipation, first and foremost. But we're also, sort of concurrently celebrating the tremendous gains our nation made as a consequence of Civil War. And, one of the outcomes of the Civil War is the changing of the Constitution, right? 13th Amendment, most importantly, in some ways, or equally, sort of importantly, is the 14th Amendment, which provides citizenship. And so when we talk about Juneteenth and the celebration of emancipation, we pair that with a celebration of citizenship. Organizers who care about racial justice and social justice have always used these opportunities, holidays, other organized opportunities to also educate people. So we celebrate, but we also organize, right? So these celebrations are cause to come together. And at those celebrations, you have voter registration, voter education, and these sorts of initiatives. And that's always how it's been. And so in a state like Georgia, where there is a sense that, wow, this is a state, John Lewis represented, and you look at the concerted efforts to deny people's rights, to their citizenship rights, particularly voting, under the guise of all sorts of other measures, you're reminded that, this struggle continues and it requires a recognition that those that want to restrict who votes, who gets elected, who controls the balance of power, they never stop, right? They don't give up and just decide one day, we're not going to continue to try. And so therefore, there always must be a reaction or response on the part of those who care about democracy and citizenship.
2 years following the murder of George Floyd, activists are still fighting for change. The Black Lives Matter movement has become widespread and is something students have studied in Power-Greene's courses.
Teaching the course from Black Power to Black Lives Matter, I knew students wanted to sort of understand in more clear ways the antecedents about this social movement. There's so much that we don't know actually about Black Lives Matter. Our course was also an exploration of the impact that Black Lives Matter has had across the United States. Each student had a choice to do a city study of Black Lives Matter movement. And so some chose, Albany, New York, or Houston, Texas, Chicago. And through a process of analyzing activism, I learned a tremendous amount of, I learned, as a researcher, I was so shocked that cities like Houston, Texas have done so little to explore the history of the Black Power movement in Houston. I mean, my student had to work really hard to look at events that he had researched and see how they're being recognized. The course was an eye-opener to me. Students, of course, learned a tremendous amount, sometimes about Boston or New Bedford, for example. And I'd say the biggest shock to me was certainly the engagement with local people. At Clark University, we've yet to do a great job of really documenting Black Lives Matter on campus. The students in the BSU have put together an incredible digital timeline of events at Clark since 2016. I was here. I remember many of those events, but to see it so organized that they presented was extraordinary. And I was shocked that I wasn't more aware of this sort of digital documenting that had taken place. And so that was a big surprise to me. And that's something that all Clark students and alums should be aware of. We don't often realize, as a community, that this social movement will be one that in 100 years people will be talking about. They'll be asking questions about. They'll want to understand. And so we need to make sure we're doing a great job of documenting it. All of this is crucial to history.
Students have the power to take what they've learned on the Clark campus and put it into action.
What I encourage my students to do is when they do go home, back to their communities and towns, to be sure to teach what they've learned in my courses, have discussion groups, have reading groups. They may feel like because they're young, they don't know that much. But, when it comes to African-American history, I always tell them they know more than most people. They know more than most in society because they're taking one course on African-American history with a professional historian. And that's more than most in our society, even their parents. Even if they don't see themselves as, activists, or organizers or teachers, that doesn't mean you can't have a discussion group or educate your family, for example, and engage in conversations and reading. This is something that's a central part of what I and other professors at Clark do. We really want our students to come away with not just academic exercise, but recognizing that they have at minimum an opportunity to share what they've learned in their communities.
To learn more about a concentration in Africana Studies at Clark, visit clarku.edu/Africana-studies. Challenge Change is produced by Melissa Hansen and Andrew Hart for Clark University. Find other episodes wherever you listen to podcasts.
1, 2, 3, Clark!